Larry Walters. He was an ordinary bloke, a truck driver from North Hollywood in America. But Larry had a dream, a truly wild dream if you ask me. He wanted to fly. Not in some fancy aeroplane, oh no. Larry's idea was much bolder. He decided he would fly using a simple garden lawn chair. It sounds absolutely bonkers, doesn't it? But Larry was a determined chap. He dreamt of this very adventure since he was just a young lad. He was going to make it happen, come what may. This was his personal Everest, his big challenge. So how on earth do you make a humble lawn chair take to the skies? With balloons, of course, and not just a few. Larry managed to get his hands on 42 weather balloons. These weren't your average party balloons, mind you. These were the real deal, big and powerful. He carefully attached them all to his trusty Sears lawn chair. He even gave his magnificent contraption a name, Inspiration 1. He was serious about this endeavor. He spent many months meticulously planning every detail. He gathered all his supplies with great care. This wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment idea, it was a proper mission. Now, Larry wasn't just going up there for a bit of a laugh, well, perhaps a little bit. He had a clear plan in his mind, a rather straightforward plan, or so he thought at the time. He aimed to float gently, just about 30 feet above his own neighborhood. He probably imagined himself waving down to his neighbors from his airy perch. A leisurely cruise over the rooftops, taking in the sights. He packed a few essential items for his journey, some sandwiches for sustenance, a six-pack of beer to properly enjoy the view, and crucially, a pellet gun. The gun wasn't for hunting pigeons, though. It was his ingenious method for coming back down. He also remembered to take a CB radio with him. He wanted to be able to chat with people on the ground below. Perhaps to let them know he was all right, or just to share his unique experience. He even sensibly tied himself securely into the chair. Safety first, even when you're embarking on a completely mad scheme like this one. He had a strong tether anchoring his chair to his Jeep, intending to cut it only when he felt he was absolutely ready. He genuinely believed he had considered every possibility. The chosen day was the 2nd of July, 1982, a beautifully sunny Californian day. Perfect weather for a little flight, or so he confidently believed. The moment of truth finally arrived. Larry gave the signal. His loyal friends on the ground cut the tether that held him down. And whoosh! He didn't just float up gently as he'd planned. Oh no, not at all. He shot upwards like a veritable rocket. Those 42 weather balloons clearly had a lot more lift, more sheer power than he had ever bargained for. Way more. He wasn't going to be cruising at a gentle 30 feet, not even 300 feet. He was climbing incredibly fast, frighteningly fast. His familiar neighborhood rapidly became a tiny, distant speck below him. This rapid ascent was definitely not part of the original plan. Just try to imagine his utter surprise, his shock. One minute he's sitting there in his back garden, feeling the anticipation. The very next he's soaring dramatically into the vast blue sky. He was going up, up and further up. Far, far higher than he ever intended or desired. The comforting sight of the ground was disappearing at an alarming rate. He had his trusty pellet gun with him, of course. That was his carefully considered tool for making his descent, but first he had the immediate and pressing problem of somehow stopping this incredibly rapid upward journey. This was a proper, unexpected shock to his system. He didn't stop climbing, not for a long while. He just kept on going higher and higher. He eventually reached an astonishing altitude of 16,000 feet. That's over 3 miles straight up into the atmosphere. Commercial aeroplanes often fly at that sort of height. He was, quite literally, in their designated flight paths. Can you even begin to imagine it? Just a solitary bloke from California sitting in an ordinary garden chair, floating serenely amongst the clouds. The air up there is incredibly thin and it gets very, very cold. He was only wearing his ordinary everyday clothes. He must have been absolutely freezing. This was extreme stuff. His CB radio, thankfully, crackled into life. He managed to make contact with the world below. He had a conversation with a rather startled radio operator. He famously said something along the lines of, "I'm in a lawn chair with a bunch of weather balloons attached." You can just picture the operator on the other end, probably thinking it was some sort of elaborate prank call. But it was entirely real, incredibly real. Larry was now a tiny, almost invisible speck in the vast expanse of the blue sky. He was a very long way from his planned, leisurely float. This had turned into a proper high-altitude adventure, whether he liked it or not. Up at a dizzying 16,000 feet, the world looks profoundly different. Larry was getting a bird's-eye view of California that he'd certainly never signed up for. He was drifting with the wind currents. Drifting, rather worryingly, directly towards the incredibly busy airspace of Los Angeles International Airport, LAX. This situation was rapidly escalating from unusual to downright serious. Airline pilots going about their normal business started spotting him. Imagine their perplexed radio calls to air traffic control. Tower, you're not going to believe this, but we've got a visual on a guy in a lawn chair up here. You can just picture the utter disbelief in the control tower. The relevant authorities were understandably alerted straight away. The Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, was not in the slightest bit amused by this turn of events. This was an unscheduled, unverified, and frankly, utterly unbelievable flying object in their controlled airspace. A man in a chair, powered by balloons. It was causing significant chaos for normal air traffic. Commercial flights had to be urgently rerouted to avoid him. Safety was, quite rightly, the major concern for everyone involved. Larry, meanwhile, was simply trying to survive his predicament. He was bitterly cold, probably a bit breathless from the thin air at that altitude, and a very long way from the safety of home. Now the crucial question was how to get back down to Earth safely. This was the most critical part of his unplanned adventure. He still had his pellet gun. His original plan, formulated in the calm of his garden, was to shoot out some of the balloons, one by one, very carefully. The idea was to make a slow, controlled descent, but attempting that from 16,000 feet, that's a tremendously long way down. And trying to accurately shoot balloons when you're freezing cold and probably shaking with a mixture of fear and adrenaline isn't an easy task by any stretch of the imagination. Each shot was absolutely critical. He began the process. Pop, one less balloon providing lift, then another carefully aimed shot. Pop. It was an incredibly slow and nerve-wracking business. He had to be extraordinarily careful, aiming with numb fingers, firing into the balloons above his head, trying desperately to control his rate of descent. The chair would undoubtedly lurch and sway a bit with each popped balloon. It must have been utterly terrifying up there, all alone. But he managed to keep his cool. He absolutely had to. His very life depended on it. He was slowly, painstakingly coming back down towards solid ground, but his wild adventure wasn't quite over yet. After what must have felt like an absolute eternity drifting in the cold, thin air, Larry was finally getting much closer to the ground. But his catalogue of troubles wasn't quite finished. As he descended, he continued to drift with the wind. He found himself heading towards the urban sprawl of Long Beach, and, as if his journey hadn't been eventful enough, he was drifting directly towards a set of formidable power lines. You really couldn't make this stuff up. After surviving the freezing altitudes and the considerable perils of busy commercial air traffic, now he faced this new danger. His remaining balloons became hopelessly entangled, caught fast in the high-voltage electricity cables. The entanglement with the power lines caused quite a commotion. It resulted in a power outage, a complete blackout in that particular Long Beach neighborhood for about 20 minutes or so. Imagine having to explain that one to the residents. Sorry folks, the power's out this evening because a man in a flying lawn chair accidentally flew into the overhead lines. Miraculously, Larry himself wasn't electrocuted by the powerful current. He was left dangling there precariously, but he was alive and, considering his ordeal, relatively unharmed. Rescue crews were soon on the scene. They carefully and skillfully managed to get him down from his tangled perch. Safe and sound at last. Once safely back on terra firma, Larry immediately faced the music. He was promptly arrested by the waiting police officers. You can't just decide to fly a lawn chair through the restricted airspace of a major city like Los Angeles without expecting some consequences. He was subsequently fined by the Federal Aviation Administration. The fine was something in the region of $1,500, which was a fair bit of money back in 1982. When inquisitive reporters asked him why on earth he did it, he gave a simple yet profound answer. A man can't just sit around. He became an instant folk hero. Lawn Chair Larry, they affectionately called him. And what became of the chair itself, that famous blue Sears lawn chair his inspiration won, didn't just end up on a scrap heap or in a garage sale. Oh no, its destiny was far grander. It is now rightly considered a piece of aviation history. It was eventually acquired by the prestigious Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. It stands as a peculiar yet inspiring testament to one man's extraordinary, if rather unorthodox, flight into the blue. Larry Walters, through his sheer audacity, showed us all that with a bit of ingenuity, a healthy dose of bravery, and a lot of balloons, even the wildest of dreams can, quite literally, take flight.